This is the silver chart, 15-minute chart, just going back about several days. And I want to point out there's still a good correlation between the Euro news and silver and what's going on. And I know, like, about the fiat currency, nobody's got to tell me about it because, believe me, I know this stuff. About the fiat currency, it doesn't last 40, 50 years. In 5,000 years, nothing's ever really lasted. It was a fiat currency. Debase the currency, becomes worth less and less and less. I know about these things, about holding silver. Now, I'm pointing out something, what's going on as far as prices that they're fixing to it, or whatever. It's still considered industrial metal. It's not considered a safe haven by traders or people that are investing in the markets. People buy physical, consider it a safe haven. But people who are actually trading on the markets, they don't. They consider it a industrial material. When the news for economics is good, it'll go up. When news for economics is bad, it'll go down. That type of stuff. And they run to the safety of the dollar. Stupid, but that's what they're doing. So I'm just kind of pointing out reality for it. Now, as far as the euro and silver correlation, it's still going on. I thought some things were changing at the end of December. Silver went down quite a bit. I think it was December 28th. The euro wasn't really down during that time period. But it looks like the same kind of patterns are still holding up. Now, if you look here on silver, this was on February 16th, 9 o'clock in the morning. It hit a low. If you go to the euro, February 16th, around 9 o'clock, that was pretty close to where the low was. Pretty close. I mean, almost an hour off, right? Up here, you got a high on February 15th, 2 o'clock, right? And if you go to the silver chart, February 15th, about 2 o'clock, it was up and then it went up a little bit more. And, this drop here, this corresponds very closely with the euro too. There was a drop right here. And you look at this last day, this leg down, but then it kind of recovered during the day. Same thing, same thing. So, if I was going to make a prediction, and a lot of this is very, very, very news driven. It's psychological all the way. But it looks like, this is a major media article. 5 reasons Europe looks less disastrous. And what I was saying was, and I could tell you, I got the mentality that is in tune with the people that run things. I have that mentality. Much so. So I would understand what they're doing. They're going to create as much of a problem with, like I said all along, the euro might fall apart, but it'll be quickly restructured. The European Union is not going to go away. The euro is not going to go away. Maybe the current system might go away, but it'll be reformed. It'll be more centralized. That's the game they're going on. That's the game that's going on. They're trying to create. Well, they're not going to do this right away because of the elections, though. That's the whole thing. But I think the game plan overall is, if there's a crisis, whatever, but the powers that be behind the scenes are holding things together, and they know what's going on. And there's a lot more. Even like the average German doesn't like a lot of things going on in the European Union. The average Italian doesn't like it either. But the leaders are all in on it. They're all in on it. So, I'm not saying it's the best thing or anything like that. I'm just trying to say the reality is, when you're getting all these people out there saying it's going to fall apart. If it falls apart, it's coming back together fast. Because I'm going to say right now, the people on the top are a lot shrewder than an average person figures. And they're playing games very well. But anyway, despite the risk, the odds are mounting that Greece will get the 130 billion euro, $170 billion bailout before March 20th, 2012. And that's because they got elections coming up in April. So that's pretty much, I figured it's a given. Now, they're supposed to have this vote on Monday. Tomorrow, I don't know if that's going to happen or not. I mean, sometimes I think they know ahead of time and they can create a situation one way or another. And if you know that, you're good in the market. So I don't know. It kind of looks that way, but You don't know. The European Central Bank's newfound willingness to lend banks as much money as they want for 3 years is proving very effective in supplying Europe's financial system with extra liquidity. Now, I want to point out about this lend banks as much money as they want for 3 years. That screams inflation, increase in the money supply. So, a few months ago, all these people were talking about deflation. Now, I wish I could predict things on a daily basis or a weekly basis more tighter, but I don't know, because a lot of it's news driven. It could be, a story, but I think the overall, I didn't buy into that deflation a few months ago, and I pointed out just about every time there's very strong inflation, there's a period of deflation that precedes high inflation because people are hoarding money. They're hoarding cash. They're not spending. They're not spending. They're not spending. And there's more and more cash being pumped into the system. Then all of a sudden everything comes out like a dam, and that's when, in other words, the money supply is increasing. We know this from Bernanke, but the velocity of money is low. Now the same situation could actually heat up with silver. The volume on the trading is very low right now, and it just could heat up. It just could heat up. I don't know. But see, looking at a couple of things, the good new Euro news, and the fact that the manufacturing index has been going up for the last few months, makes me think the whole thing's going to change around. And it's also so low, they just lowered margins, so they're not going to raise them. It's probably decent bet that silver should be moving up pretty soon. I don't think it's necessarily going to move up tomorrow, but I think pretty soon, not some months off or anything like that. That's what I think. The Europeans have financed a facility that can lend its cash-strapped states, defend against market attacks and member states' sovereign debt, and also aid banks. So they're all being forced to work together. And that was one thing I was saying. That's the game plan. And this is with the fall of Berlusconi in Italy and the appointment of Prime Minister Mario Monti, the situation has changed dramatically. Now, I don't know what the deal is exactly, but that was some good information from Lindsey Williams that the elite wanted to get rid of Berlusconi. And I picked up on this, who was that female group Femin, and I was thinking to myself, they were out there protesting this Berlusconi. I would use, anything that group says as they're the voice of the elite. They're the voice of the elite. That's, in other words, there's a scam going on. There's some money behind it. I know that crap isn't for free. There's money behind them. So that's another indication, a tidbit to indicate to you what's really going on with the powers that be, because that group is financed by somebody behind the scenes. I know that for a fact. Let me put it that way. I know it for a fact in my head. Not that I got a piece of paper that says that, but I know it. The core of the Euro region is holding together better than expected. The German economy is still performing well. France, although not in Germany's league, is not faring badly and avoided contraction in the fourth quarter of 2012. Although recession is coming to Europe, it may not be as severe as originally feared. Greece, in other words, has not affected the entire continent. So now the drama's changed the other way. So you might see a spike, where the metals are going to start going up quite a bit. Now, as far as oil, this is right hot off the presses actually in the last hour, but we kind of knew this was coming up, so I don't know if the market's priced it in already. They might have. Iran has just halted oil shipments to Britain and France. The oil ministry said, the Iranian oil ministry said Sunday, in an apparent preemptive blow against the European Union after the bloc imposed sanctions on Iran's crucial fuel exports. But I think the markets knew this was coming up, but I don't know if that's going to affect oil right away. But I do want to point out something about oil. This is like a tricky market in a lot of ways too. It's I had a good run, but usually it's up and down, up and down. It never goes straight up. And I just want to point out this was a pretty hard resistance point, around 105, 106. And oil pulled back here pretty hard. I mean, you're talking it was up to 106 and it dumped all the way down to 96, right? That's why I say if you're in oil, especially triple leverage, set your stops because this one day right here, this was a hard this jumped. I mean, that was a hard move in one day. And that's exactly what happens. I'd be nervous about buying this stuff right now myself. If I was already in it, I don't know if I'd sell. I probably would. That's why I'm more conservative. Once I grab a good gain, I don't care. I'm out of there. But there's a lot of news going on with shortages from Libya and stuff, and yet it pulled back. So I'd be cautious if you're in this stuff. And sometimes I'm scared of these types of moves. So a lot of times that's why I hate stops. It's like you get stopped out down here. You really don't know. You really don't know for sure. You don't know. And but you can go by some of my past history. And some of the resisting points. 104 and 105 is strong resistance. So it may be that it could pull back under some type of other news. I don't know. I don't know what those news stories would be. But this market right here is very news driven. Probably should be sitting around 100, I would imagine. But I think the tensions in Iran are going to keep going up, and it's going to go up, up, up. It's probably going to hit 150 or more within the next, I don't know, if the attack occurs in this spring, it's going to hit something crazy number, way over 120 in the near term future. But I just think it's going to pull back a little bit. That's what I keep thinking before it gets up there. And usually it pulls back like, say it made it up to about, may say it goes up to 105. It could pull down to almost $10. Just like that. Just like that. And it does this junk. And just look back, what it did. These are this was a margin rate hike back here in May, but there's been other reasons for political events coming about that will knock down oil, because demand for oil is actually very low right now. So just be wary. As far as some of the other metals, I think they're going to take off pretty well fairly soon. And that just all depends on what's going on with the euro. Now, if the euro news is good, that should also be bullish for crude oil. But this is also due to geopolitical tensions. So, like I was saying, if you're in that stuff, just beware of a pullback and set your stops. You might wait. And I noticed a lot of times, like oil, silver, and all this stuff, it'll have the pullback like in the wee hours in the morning, when nobody's trading, That's like, in other words, you set your stops and the thing drops like, 5% inside of overnight, and then you're stopped out. That's sometimes the reason I don't like setting those things, but it's very difficult to say what's going to happen. And I look at a lot at the news events that happen, and I'm sure a lot of other people do too. But I would think that in the case of the euro, because the elections are coming up, it's going to be fine. It may not be Monday, maybe tomorrow some news will come out, but they're going to straighten everything out for these elections. So I think a lot of the commodities are going to start floating up, especially because that primary manufacturing index is looking good. And I did point out that, when you're looking at the euro and you're looking at silver, it does look like a pretty good correlation still. So if the euro strengthens, you're probably going to see silver get back over 34, 35, and that depends on what happens with the euro. But I don't expect any explosive moves in silver right now. That's just my opinion, because it had a 20% move upward, but to float up to about 35 would not would not be too unreasonable, but it does depend very much on what's happening with the euro.